Yes, it is. And we have more to come that will be on our website shortly, but we are really excited for this special Art at Noon, this Thursday Art at Noon, kicking off the season. Yeah, and it's great to, I mean, it's great now that I kind of have the in-person, like you were talking about, Anna, like getting to see folks, but also that we still have this shared space with folks that have been with us since the beginning, it feels like. I see some of the faculty. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Ashley. Thanks for joining our Art at Noon today.
Wonderful. And I know we have a good number of people registered today that I'm sure folks are going to trickle in on their lunch breaks or from vacations, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have a packed program for you all today. So it's so nice to see everyone here for this special Art at Noon. I'm Abby King, Assistant Director of Adult Programs here at PAFA, and I wanted to welcome you all here with us in our virtual space. And to start, I wanted to respectfully acknowledge that I, along with our speakers and many of our attendees, are speaking to you from the ancestral lands of the Lenape people, whose presence and resilience in Pennsylvania continues to this day. We take this opportunity to honor the original caretakers of this land and recognize the histories that have brought our institution and ourselves here. And before I hand things over to a special guest to introduce our speaker, I did want to mention we are recording today's event. You can see the little dot, hopefully, and I'll be sharing it later on PAFA's YouTube channel. I'll be sharing a link to that in the chat momentarily. So if you know of anyone who wanted to be here today but couldn't for scheduling conflicts, know that that, along with an amazing library of our Zoom events, are all on PAFA's YouTube channel. And just a little bit about the schedule. So our scholar is going to be sharing a presentation on his exhibition, and then we will have time at the end, say, for questions and thoughts. So please feel free to drop things in the chat as we go. We'd love to hear from you, but no, we'll have time at the end to hear from everybody. So now I'm really proud and pleased to hand things over to my fantastic colleague, Vice President of Museum Research and Scholarship, Kenneth R. Woodcock, Curator of Historical American Art and Director for the Center for the Study of the American Artists. Please welcome Dr. Anna O Marley.
Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Huewayne. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. This is my first Art at Noon in my new office. I am back at PAFA about 4 days a week. The museum is open. We are so excited to welcome you all back this fall for exhibitions at PAFA. And I'm so excited to introduce Huewayne to you. So it's Huewayne and I were just talking about the last time that we saw each other was in person. We were together at a conference in February of 2020, right before the world changed. We were at the College Art Association in Chicago, and I was a respondent for a panel on new strategies for thinking about women artists. And Huewayne gave a talk about this exhibition that he was planning here in Philadelphia that's currently at the African American Museum of Philadelphia. And he just blew everyone in CAA away. And it was an amazing session. And then, you know, about a month later, the world shut down. And we've had an amazing suite of these online programs that Abby has brought together for us. And so what's exciting about what's going on at PAFA now is that we are having our exhibitions, and we also are continuing these wonderful digital programs. So I'm excited to be with you a lot this fall. Abby will be sharing more programs with you. So before I introduce Huewayne briefly, I just want to say that one of the reasons we were so excited to have him speak today is that the exhibition that he curated at the African American Museum of Philadelphia closes September 12th. So you have one more weekend to go see it if you're in Philadelphia. I'm going tomorrow morning. You can book a timed ticket. And they also have a wonderful virtual exhibition that you can look at if you enjoy the talk today. one of the reasons that we really wanted to invite Huewayne to talk about Anna Russell Jones is because it really ties in with an exhibition that we just opened here called Women in Motion, 150 Years of Artistic Networks of Women Artists at PAFA. And one of the particular connections between Anna Russell Jones and PAFA is the Sartain family. And Emily and Harriet Sartain are incredibly important women leaders that people who maybe attended more know about, but maybe not everybody else does. So, and I think the same can be said about Anna Russell Jones, and it's thanks to the amazing research of Huewayne for bringing Anna Russell Jones to our attention. And I think Huewayne would agree with me that we're just really starting to dig into these archives. We're starting to dig into the archives of more. Huewayne has done some wonderful digging into these archives, and archives have amazing stories to tell us. They also have embedded challenges and problems, and they hide things from us, but then there are always new stories to learn. And I think of my scholarship on women artists as just a beginning, a sort of launching pad for all the new work that the next generation is going to do. So with that, let me introduce Huewayne. So Huewayne Watson was born in Kingston, Jamaica, and is a fine and conceptual artist who mobilizes concepts of ancestor to activate practices of archival research, writing, documentary photography, and printmaking as methods for attempting the multiple literacies present within various communities throughout the Americas. So a man after my own heart, thinking about the Americas, right? Not just the United States of America. His work explores the culture and politics of public life as it relates to claims of autonomy and practices of memorializing past connections. He is an instructor in African and African American studies in the School of Social Transformation at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. And Huewayne, we are so excited to have you virtually here with us in Philadelphia to learn more about Anna Russell Jones and the amazing archival and curatorial work that you have done, bringing her story to us here in Philadelphia.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anna. I can't say thank you enough. You know the connection we have, and I'll sort of talk back from that in a way, and then sort of move us through some of what I will present in paper and really a read-in form, and not to really do the call and response, but to really read through some of the scholarship, right? And attend to the work of what we, may look at. And I'll sort of present some slides to you all and get us through, and again, as Anna says, right, an introduction, right, really to this work, to this collection, to Anna Russell Jones. I do believe there's more to be done. There's more that will be done. And I think, growing how we think about these fields of study, growing how we think about the Americas, and where we can enter into that sort of work and think with one another, think with each other, I think is important. And to fold it back, I'll say that, my training, really began at SUNY, Buffalo State University of New York, Buffalo State College. I majored in history, studied with Dr. Felix Armfield, right, who really thought seriously and wrote critically about education, women's history, right, feminist thought, and for my own self, right, the space enough to think critically within historical study, right, around narratives and these prose that are sometimes piecemeal, but if we do attend to them, right, we can at least get at a story, And we know biographies are important for artists and in the practice of art history, right? Knowing where someone was born, what that means for whatever circumscribed, right, their lives, but then saying what happens or what maybe perhaps do they do, right, with their own recognitions, right, with their own sense of acknowledging, advancing even, and perhaps maybe being able to contribute to something in a real way that at least allows for us to solve some problems or at least look at the variables, right, for particular equations. So you can get that I'm pretty awkward, but maybe even a little nerdy about this stuff. But I will try and at least move us through, right? So I'll begin by saying, right, that my MA in African American Studies from the Institute for Research in African American Studies at Columbia University, right? It was what people say, formidable. I don't know, it helped me form a lot of my thinking. I did something that I probably shouldn't do, because one of the things that's interesting is I curated this exhibition, right? Anna Russell Jones, The Art of Design, as artists, right? I really owe it to people like Dejay Duckett at the African American Museum in Philadelphia, right, engaging me in serious ways. I owe it to folks like Abby and Anna Marley, right? And Anna Marley really, when I was a wee little, Institute for Museum and Library Services fellow at the African American Museum in 2012, right, afforded us an opportunity to witness, right, to bear witness in a serious way, and also observe, examine, look at, view, not touch, right? You can't touch the art, but I felt touched in a way, right? There was a connection around how this exhibition was curated, the intention around, right, where the pieces were positioned, yes, but even, right, what was felt in terms of the surfaces that they had to be adhered to, or I don't know, presented up against, like, the wall. Like I was like, well, I'm really seeing Henry Tanner's work in person, right? Like, what does it mean for someone who's a student of history to study, to read through, to think, right, to endure scholarship, but then to also bear witness to the works, right? To know that unlike Scipio Moorhead, right, who is perhaps or is attributed to, right, the engraving of Phyllis Wheatley, right, someone who brings us into, right, Black or African American arts and letters, right, as poet and also as writer, right? I think about, right, these genealogies to say that Tanner is a part of some genealogy and I need to get with it. And I actually reached out to Anna as, I don't know, a random student of the arts. It was like, can I meet with you just to like, this is just way cool. And Anna really helped me think about the WPA's presence here in Philadelphia, and knowing that it had a presence, right? Who were the actors? And in many ways, coupled with my time at the African American Museum on fellowship, I came to this curiosity around Anna Russell Jones, and also trying to think seriously, right, in an academic sense of it, right? What do we mean about training, right? What do we mean about like engagement in art and design, right? This sort of fusion of art and design. So let me read through some of this to ground us, and I'll talk, still back and forth with y'all, and then pull up these slides and we'll sort of like get into things, and hopefully you all, again, will sort of just bear with me. So the paper I titled it, Anna Russell Jones and Archives of African American Art and Life. Yet the exhibition is titled Anna Russell Jones, The Art of Design. And so Anna Russell Jones, who was born in Jersey City, New Jersey in 1902 and died in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1995, worked extensively within the practices of visual art and design. Yet she remains a relatively obscure artist despite producing more than 17 linear feet of archival material and I'll get through what that means for me in some of the presentation. But as the first African-American woman to receive a 4-year scholarship from the Philadelphia Board of Education and first African-American graduate of the Philadelphia School of Design for Women, PSDW, now Moore College of Art and Design, also my alma mater. Russell Jones for the MFA. Russell Jones, her educational development achievements in art marked the beginning of a life that not only challenged, but also moved beyond the delimited ideological and corporeal definitions of Black and women artists. So I'll talk through what it means to be perhaps artist or woman artist, African-American woman artist, right? Or an African-American or Black woman in the arts, right? Within American arts, for instance. Her artwork and life experiences are useful for thinking about the political dangers, and those are real. I'll get to some of those, and economic barriers that Black women artists contested, especially throughout the decades surrounding her most compelling acts of creation. This article builds, not yet, I don't think it's an article because it's not published, and we'll see where that scholarship goes, but it builds on my curatorial work, right, of her exhibition at the African American Museum in Philadelphia. In it, I construct a conceptual framework that helps us to make sense of Russell Jones's modes of being, cultural practices, works, and intellectual contributions. Specifically, I examine the emancipatory politics, meaning politics that may emancipate, of visual literacy, and educational attainment undergirded by creativity and self-directed labor that defined her lifetime of work, and her activism in art and design. On October 2nd, 1920, the Philadelphia Tribune published a portrait of Anna Russell Jones, born Anna Rachel Russell, dressed in her academic regalia under the heading, "Graduated with High Honors." The caption just below the photograph read, "Miss Anna R. Russell of 1314 Cambridge Street, Philadelphia, graduated from the William Penn High School for Girls, June 21, 1920. Was awarded a 4-year scholarship to the Philadelphia School of Design for Women by the Philadelphia Board of Education. Ms. Russell is a graduate of the New Jersey City Grammar School, number 23, and spent 1 year in study at Dickinson High School of that city. She is also a teacher in Walt's Dream Dancing Academy. We congratulate Ms. Russell and wish her much success." Right, I paused there, and I really wanted to think about that for a moment. I had to think with my students even most recently about what it meant, right, for someone to, like Russell Jones, to have roots or connections to the Mid-Atlantic, right, to even think about New Jersey and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right, Pennsylvania and New Jersey being connected, but also these cities in New Jersey being connected to Pennsylvania, or maybe people having connections or perhaps having some need or some force around movement, right? One of the things that I made clear, and I'll get into even more, is that Anna Russell Jones moved over her entire life, right? This is someone who, from her early ages, is moving. She's moving from city to city. She's moving from school to school, or program to program. So the question of advancement is one that we can hang there in the open, but nonetheless, there's still, even down to the physical movement, and I'll bring that up more in terms of a concern for someone maintaining 17 linear feet of materials that we can call, right, an archive or collection, right? So I'm trying to fold these things, right, together to say, what are we really looking at and sort of paging through? News of Russell Jones's success was published again on October 16, 1920 in the Quaker City column of the Chicago Defender, evidenced in how word about it circulated between several historic African-American newspapers. The academic scholarship that Jones received was no small accomplishment for a young Black woman living in early 20th century Philadelphia. I don't write this in, but I say it's important because, yes, Anna Russell Jones becomes the first Black graduate of Moore College or the Philadelphia School of Design for Women, but she wasn't the first or the only Black woman admitted, right? The same time, right, 1920, that Jones is admitted, right, entry into into the PSDW, Esther Roten, right, is also admitted, right, to PSDW, but there's a tragic occurrence that happens in her life and she doesn't enroll. So there's a difference, right, for Black artists when we think about, at least, right, a difference between, not the difference for Black artists differently from other artists. I'm saying when we think about Black artists, it allows us to think about the difference between what it means to be admitted to the arts and then what it means to enroll and continue on in the arts, right? That this movement is real, it is actualized. I'll continue to read. It marked an entry into 4 years of disciplinary study in theoretical and practical design, as Russell Jones effectively claimed formal admittance to the underlying principles and practices of art. Her study was not without the rigors of daily calculations in the nature and science of materials that were to be observed, examined, and interpreted, yielding some of the most detailed, and I'll show you some of that, specific and precise formulations of geometric proportioning in art at the time, rooted in the South Kensington system and art pedagogy adopted and adapted from the London School, or London's Female School of Design. Early instruction at PSDW was outlined in 6 stages. So I'll read some of this to get at, and then I'll move into the slides, what we're really looking at, right? When I talk through and present for you all, right, a sort of introduction to Anna Russell Jones's collection. First, an elementary class for the education of the eye and for the disciplining of the hand, by copying from flat, rigid outlined examples in which no compass or means of measurement will be allowed. Precise imitation will be required before the student can enter the second elementary class for the free hand, outlined from copies of curved lined objects, linear geometry, drawing and natural leaves, whose general aspects is suggestive of geometrical proportions. Accuracy and neatness of execution, with the ability to define intelligently the terms used in the doctrine of perspective, will be the prerequisite to entering the third class. I take us through, but I pause for a moment, I jumped over and I'll go to the 6th. Examination papers in practical geometry, perspective, object drawing, freehand drawing, and copies of natural flowers and leaves and elementary design will be furnished to the student in order to test their proficiency. The student who may pass the examination committee successfully may enter any of the industrial departments to learn designing, wood engraving, or printing, or print cutting, or they may receive a certificate of proficiency as a teacher of so much of elemental art. Duplicate examples such as are used in the schools will be furnished to teachers at a cost price. So I wanted to pause there, and then I will sort of share my screen with you all so that I can get into the PowerPoint presentation and move us through even further. But I wanted to pause there to have us think seriously about, right, this is someone who had received training, actual training, right? That much of what we can even sort of attend to in the scholarship has to deal with, right, the intention of someone saying that, well, the arts is where I see a viable path, and what does that mean to continue, right, along that or within that viable path somewhere in relation to it, knowing that there are real and actual dangers, right? And that there are barriers and many of them are unseen, yet and still we have someone like Russell Jones, right, who's able to persist and endure. So I will get into that PowerPoint presentation with you all, share my screen with you all now, and we'll sort of move along. So Anna Russell Jones, The Art of Design, is the title of the exhibition. And if we look at Anna Russell Jones, right, more closely, she's born Anna Rachel Ray Melinda Jones, 1902 in Jersey City, New Jersey. Her father is John C. Russell, right, a Pullman porter. We think about Black labor, the types of work that Black people were, I guess, centered in or had to endure, or any other form of their relationship to it, right? This is the late 19th century into the early 20th century, and you have someone like Russell Jones who's grown up in a family where her father is a Pullman porter or works in relation to the growth of railroads and industrialization in Philadelphia and the Mid-Atlantic. And her mother, Anna M. Evans, and you'll hear her, and if you ever check out the documentary by Nadine Patterson, praise song for pioneering spirit, right? Anna Russell Jones chimes or jokes about her mother, right, playing piano on the washing board, right? That her mother in many ways was a washerwoman, not uncommon to many Black women domestics and laborers in Philadelphia and the Mid-Atlantic DMV region. Her siblings, Thomas E. and John W. Russell, moved to Wilkes-Barre, Luzerne County, PA, where father found work as a Pullman porter, right? They moved from New Jersey to Pennsylvania, Luzerne County. The father, right, passes. Anna M. is widowed in 1911, and the family moves to Philadelphia, PA. Anna is encouraged to pursue education as her own way forward, but what does that mean, right? What does Black education look like for a young Black woman in early 20th century? In a way that says we can look at it closely and at least get at some sense of intimacy in the ways how we think about maybe even the history of photography, the photographic arts. We know that people like Deb Willis, right, have engaged or at least written about Black people, Black families, African-American photography. We look here at early daguerreotypes and other forms of photographic renderings of the Russell family, right? There are items in the collection from before 1911 that ties Russell Jones back to her family ties in the South. I think particularly Virginia and other places where one of her siblings eventually moves to when the family is not broken up, but the family is sort of shifted around in the midst of her mother, right? Anna M. Evans sort of maintaining a sense of continuum. And for herself, right, her own sense of self, Anna Russell Jones moving through education as at least the forum, right, or at least the place in which she will work out much of what she will do and accomplish. So Anna Russell Jones graduates, right, from William Penn High School for Girls. She did attend Dickinson High School, but by the time she's sort of finishing her senior years, right, in high school, she's in Pennsylvania. She's at William Penn High School, right? And one of the things that I get at and I talk about in the paper at some length, right, is that there was an entire battle, almost political battle playing out, right, in Pennsylvania within the legislature even, right, concerning what women's education meant, right? She is the first African-American to be awarded a four-year scholarship from the Philadelphia Board of Education. But at William Penn High School, there were debates and concerns around, well, what were women to take up and what should they pursue? And this meant something in terms of funding. It meant something in terms of structure and organization. It meant something in terms of how these women moved through their education, but also moved through what we consider the physical setting, the site of their becoming and their training in a way that at least allows for them to say they have something to offer and they have something to contribute, right? So in the archives, in the collection, we have her sort of, spring 1920 yearbook, right? One of her friends or someone she knows signs, writes in the yearbook, strive for true womanhood, right? Like that is not to say that we're reading back onto Anna Russell Jones some feminist identity, but she really is in this sort of dialogue and this discourse concerning womanhood, or sort of, what does it mean to have perhaps to hold on to a form or a space that is contested, right? That she is one of the students who chose to, and perhaps had to navigate, right, different types of subversive efforts to move women into the domestic sciences, meaning home economics. Anna Russell Jones is someone who says, well, striving for a true womanhood perhaps means I choose, or I direct, or I perhaps pursue, right, what it is that I'm interested in. And for her, it is the arts, right? It is clear that from early on, she's holding on to the arts. And I don't say the visual arts, right? I say the arts. She's holding on to what it means to be an artist. So the news clipping I read to you all from, again, I share with you all here, right? You see it shows up in the Philadelphia Tribune, 1912, right? 1920, my apologies. And right, it shows up again being circulated, right, in the Quaker Times in Chicago. So between these communities and places where Black people are rooting themselves, or perhaps figuring out and laying out certain paths, right? Anna Russell Jones decides to anchor herself in Philadelphia, entering, right, being admitted to, and then also enrolling at PSDW, right? So after she's being awarded a 4-year scholarship that had been established, I believe, since 1860s. She is the first African-American or Black student, right, to receive that scholarship, and that happens, right, in 1920. So we'll get some context. I have a clip here from the praise song for a Pioneering Spirit, produced by Nadine Patterson, with narration by Tony K. Bambara. I think about this as providing a lot of the context, right, for how we can even get at the biographical concerning Russell Jones and the Black feminist thinking, right, that takes up someone like Russell Jones and the Black women's film and feminist film circuit, right, that this sort of circulated during the 1990s. I sort of use this to really allow for Russell Jones to speak for herself. So I play a bit of it for you all here, so you get a sense of what she meant in terms of her experience enduring, right, an education as a Black woman, right, African-American woman at PSDW. And then we'll move forward and try to get a sense of, well, what does she still, what do we end up with?
Age submits, but youth, even though the door be barred, revolts. Age contributes to the burden by pressing youth into the beaten paths of teaching, preaching, and medicine as appropriate professional goals. The year was 1921, and a handful of young African Americans like Anna Rachel Russell decided to enter non-traditional professions like business, the arts, technical fields.
I won the 4-year scholarship to the School of Design for Women. From School of Design for Women from William Penn High. Well, I was the only designer in the city, I think. I hadn't seen any other. In my school, when visitors came to see us working, they peeked in the door. They said, "Who is that over there?" And whoever was escorting the person said, "Oh, she's just a Filipina." And she escorted the person to another room. "Oh, she was just a Japanese or Chinese." And they laughed. They knew what it was. Yes. I was the only Negro around.
So I sort of, in many ways, introduced that clip to you all to, again, have us think about Russell Jones being interviewed and engaged by these Black women in a sort of genealogy, right, within the arts, allowing her to provide for us a record in voice and sound that gets us to, right, what was some of her experience? So I've included here, right, a close look at the curriculum to say that, well, if we are in if we are in art and we're thinking about art seriously as training, right, that she's doing and completing geometric construction, her specific courses, right, historic ornament, nature, convention and application, theory of color, composition, perspective, history of art, charcoal, design, nature and application, lettering, advertising, and this should say poster composition and lettering, right? She moves through a specific curriculum and gets herself to the moment of commencement, right? So after 4 years of training, Anna Russell Jones is awarded with several prizes and an honorable mention for her original design work at her 1924 graduation from the Philadelphia School of Design for Women with the diploma in theoretical and practical design. And all of these prizes, I mean, they're prizes, right? But her presence there meant something, right? Like there's a sense of invisibility that we can get at concerning Russell Jones, but her time there meant something because even for her relationship, right, with Harriet Sartain, right, it maintains that, you know, she's designing and also winning acknowledgement. Here we see for the cover design for the school catalog for 1924, 1925, but she's immediately engaged in practicing art and design. She starts out early on in her profession and career, right? We see here her sort of memo pad, I guess, Anna Russell Jones, designer. Later, she creates, I guess, or has these printed and it shows artist and designer, but we see some of the patterns that she has to work on producing for her employment at major carpet and wallpaper, rug and carpet and wallpaper companies, right? So Axe Minister and the JG Spec studios, right, where she's hand painting, creating designs for these companies using much of her training. So again, moving through the collection, right, we have the items here with us in a serious way, not because Axe Minister kept any of their carpet specimens or rugs, or they kept any of the drafts, right, or the proofs. Anna Russell Jones, right, kept and maintained her work in such a way that we're able to have this collection, right? We're able to think about this archive. We see the detail of the hand of the artist, right, in the use of watercolor, right, to produce these works in historic ornament. I'll move through some of these to try and get us to where Russell Jones sort of makes this shift into being artist, designer, and perhaps given serious consideration to what it means to have a studio, right? So she leaves the rug and carpet companies, yes, as someone who is an in-studio designer and works as a freelancer, right? Composing, drafting her own letters and correspondences, reaching out to who she needs to enter into this business. And she's doing so, right, during the 1930s, as early as 1930, but all the way up to about 1935, 36. She leaves the sort of like rug, carpet, design business and writes, right, in her journals and writes in letters that help us to understand, even as, again, Harriet Sartain is writing back to her, right? This is in 1940. I can read to you what the letter says: from the office of the dean, and it is February 15, 1940. My dear Anna Russell, I was very glad to have your long letter telling me all you have been doing and the success you have been having in showing your work. And if it is at all possible, I will stop and see your exhibition at Wagner Free Library. I hope I shall be able to see you next time you come in. Sincerely yours, Harriet Sartain, Dean. Right, that this family was influential and instrumental in her training and in her education, but really in sort of being connected as women in the arts and within genealogies, right, and over generations. And Russell Jones for herself is at least thinking about, right, genealogies of art and multiplicity, right, when we think about visual literacy, right, that there is economic, social organization, community, right, concerns here, right, and not just literacy, but multiple literacies that Jones seeks to engage, right, through her actual conceptualization, her conceptualizing, her founding, right, what in her thinking put into, right, this teacher's art service. She writes to teachers up and down, right, the Eastern Seaboard, right, from Wilmington, Baltimore, Maryland, Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, teachers, again, within the Mid-Atlantic, and she's trying to have for them whatever the visuals they need for these different literacies, right, that their students or the students of the studies need to attend to, but also a sort of public-facing identity, I guess, right, this public-facing person that she takes up, character she takes up to act in a way that says she can work with, right, the free library system. I remember walking over to the Central Branch to check with them to see about, the sort of verify in many ways, like, is this real? Like, is this, this person is writing about it, but was it a like real thing? And it's like, yeah, like they have, I'm not sure the posters necessarily. We see some of the drafts and other poster materials in the collection, but they do have record of her working with the entire, right, free library system in many ways, very early on, hand painting, right, the illustrations for what's necessary to bring about different literacies, right, during the 30s and the 40s, and engage in various topics and subjects. So much so that there's a real professionalization that happens, right? There is a sort of positioning that Anna Russell Jones takes up. So if we think critically about what it means to enter into or be admitted to, right, a school, enter into a practice, or enroll really enough to make it to the point of commencement, pursue a path, maintain a path, show up and be enlisted as the first, right, Black woman, and not first because that is necessarily something of significance, but it does signal something to us, and at least leaves us with a record, right? But it's clear throughout her entire tenure in the arts, regardless of where she was positioned or whatever post, right, she took up, right, the role of artist at. Anna Russell Jones was alongside other Black women, alongside other women, period, in general, right, as a member of the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps, right, or the WACS, or the Women's Army Corps, I believe it becomes later on. But this is someone whose skills are included, right, in our understanding of graphic schemas that are at even the level of national concern and outside of, right, just say the folk or the personal or even like intimate narrative. So there's something there for us to give consideration to, because she's among many others, amongst many others, but seeks out, again, her continued training enough to get her to studies in medical illustration, right? So she takes her time and says, well, I'm interested in what it means to study and study art, but not art for the sake of, I guess, what we may enter into concerning the subjective, but to think critically about art and how it may attend to the sciences. And she really doesn't create a program at Howard University, but she actually helps to form what becomes a program that she moves through as the only artist, right, in the medical school at the medical college, and is recognized, right, and is taken up in many ways by the Black medical professionals as someone who can be alongside them in the medical theater and observation rooms and surgeries, right? Looking at Black patients with concerns for Black health, or even health sciences and medical sciences broadly, right? So there are moulages, there are sketches, there are drawings, precise renderings, right? But this is someone who suffers, and I'll talk more about this later if we get into the Q&A, right? That shift into the scientific being perhaps subsumed or contested, right, by the photomechanical or technologies that are at least more precise in terms of leaving us free of human error. Nonetheless, Anna Russell Jones, right, in many ways persists in this viable path and brings us to at least, right, 8 decades of a life in the arts, and is awarded the Doctor of Fine Arts from Moore College of Art and Design in 1987. We see pictured here. I sort of will end my sort of presentation here with reading this because it helps me to ground this introduction really, and whoever takes up this work and wherever this work goes, whatever it grows into, I'll say it fits into some of this in a way. When I curated along I think it was with folks in my cohort at Moore College, there was a Moore Monuments exhibition that we sort of came to, and I thought about Anna Russell Jones not in the terms of a monument or, but really in terms of monumental. But I say that this work really fits into this because I'll read it, right? Dear Guerrilla Girls, I am a librarian. I cannot help but feel that research is itself a creative act. and that many artists, designers use both library-based research and studio-based research in a seamless way, the one informing the other. Your own work seems to be an example of this, right? So I kind of, as artists and audience, had checked out the Guerrilla Girls exhibition, right? That our sort of like More Monuments exhibition was alongside. And for me, this was, you know, that sort of like bridge, and it allowed me to think seriously about like, well, what's going on when we say we're taking a look at Anna Russell Jones, The Art of Design, right? Or thinking about Anna Russell Jones and archives of African-American life and art. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we could chat if y'all are cool with that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Huewayne. That was wonderful. You're getting lots of love in the chat and in people's emojis in their Zoom. We have a few minutes left together, but I did want to make sure to thank profusely the African American Museum in Philadelphia, or AMP, for hosting your exhibition and allowing us to have this event today. And I know that we have Dejae Duckett, the curator of curatorial services. I wanted to make sure to give Dejae a moment if she'd like to share anything, but also just thank her for being here with us. I'm going to allow people to also unmute themselves too. Hold on one second. Yeah, and especially Dejae, if you'd want to mention, we have some great upcoming partnerships with AMP that we are just so excited to celebrate with you coming up.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Abby. And Anna and PAFA for hosting this event. Huewayne, as ever, thank you for sharing your deep knowledge and all you've contributed to the canonization of Anna Russell Jones. I just wanted to say there's been so much thinking and writing and talking about the importance of the Black archive and what that means and how it manifests. And the collection, the rich collection of Anna Russell Jones papers and work at the museum, it's just really evidence of that, of the importance of that archive. And, you know, what's so gratifying for me is that, you know, since we've reopened at AMP, I've had a dozen scholars calling and wanting to see the papers and write about Anna Russell Jones. And, you know, hey, someone calls me and says, you know, I'm teaching a class and I want to talk about Anna Russell Jones. Can you show me more? I'm writing a chapter on 20th century design and I want to include her. Like, this is what is so exciting. And, you know, being able to share her work from France to across the country, and it's just been amazing. And that happened because of the foresight of Nanette Aker-Clark, who was the director of AMP in the 90s, who championed, you know, taking the work into the collection. It's Nadine Patterson, who did the documentary, you saw a snippet, and it's Huewayne Watson. You know, those are the three. I mean, in 2017, when I went to Moore to see his talk, I had just started AMP, and, you know, this is what really kind of whetted my appetite to learn more about her and to want, you know, I was like, I ran up at the end of the talk. I was like, Huewayne, you have to come to AMP and guest curate and do some work here. So it's just an honor and a pleasure. You know, we still have a little while left for that the exhibition will be up. It's closing on the 12th of September. So yes, just thank you all. I do have to jump off and jump into another meeting, but I'm just so glad to see all of you. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dejae. So many meetings for all of us, but thank you for making the time and for being here and sharing that. And we look forward to many more appearances with our institutions together. And thank you, folks, for all of the wonderful resources and thoughts you're putting in the chat. You know, Anna, I did thank you for that plug. Dr. Anna Marley shared that we will have more Art at Noons coming up. So please keep a lookout. Those will hopefully be on the website in the coming weeks of our full schedule, including some showcasing Laura Wheeler-Waring in particular.
Abby, I noticed that there was a question in here in the chat from Mary Ellen for Huewayne. Maybe was she innovating or filling orders for specific design patterns?
And yeah, so both, right? There was the sort of, you know, fill in orders because again, I say there are real connections that sort of fill out a lot of her career, right? So Harriet Sartain is someone who is connected, right, in the design profession. I don't want to say in the carpet and rug business. I don't think that's what Harriet Sartain was involved in, but in terms of thinking broadly, right, about the and I mean down to, right, engaging the Franklin Institute, the Sartain name in terms of advancing what art is in real form, design is in real form, right, in technical form even, is something that they truly advance. And so the letters that they're writing to each other, right, that's a part of the work for them that allows for some of the uptake of, maybe I guess you could say a contract here, right, and a contract there. But and I'll even say, like, real quickly, like, looking at, like, ornaments, right? That entire history, to say that, no, like, this person is studying all of this stuff and they're engaged in that business. But, like, it comes, and also they put themselves out there, right? She's writing letters to these different carpet and rug companies saying, hey, here's what I've done already. The work is finished, right? Proofed and checked, ready to go. I'm not waiting to I guess take too much direction, because I have the training and the wherewithal to at least draft out, right, my sort of like sense of this practice, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you. And Mary Ellen said very helpful in the chat. And I was curious, and I know this could be a whole other presentation, so maybe this is just warming up for future partnerships, but, thinking about, I was really struck by the kind of shift into medical illustration. And I wondered if you could speak at all, like, but it makes sense when you start to think about the science of creating those intricate designs and then the science of the body. And I know we probably have some of our humanities partners on the call. I know you do as well. We work with those fields, but you could speak to maybe how that came about, or any insights would be wonderful.
Yeah, I think for me, right, I there was no chance that I could, like, ignore it, right? It's there. It's not something I necessarily needed to highlight about the collection. But for me, right, if we think of even about the sort of like art, at least in the classics in Greek, and sort of the human form, and reproduction and replication, even like preciseness, and doing that in stone, marble, sculpting, works like May Howard Jackson, or Augusta Savage, right? We have Simone Leigh, but you're working with materials, right? This is somebody that can say, well, there's a knowledge there. I have the sort of intricate, like, trigonometry, physiology, anatomy, biology, Greek. This is someone who moved through courses of knowledge, but they're able to apply it to materials in the ways how there were real dangers for women exploring, right, these paths like Marie Curie and X-ray and crystallography, right? Like, you can get to some of the beauty and art of it all, but the science of it, right, is maybe looking at cadavers or being in a surgical theater and really saying that my art training and thinking, right, is moving within another space, right? It's not additive, right? Like the ways how we don't say, like, somebody like Mary Cassatt is additive to impressionist, right? It's that there's a real core of what's there that makes up that thing there. So I think about the medical illustration in that way.
Huewayne, I love that connection, and I love the connection you made just to the idea of the medical illustration to design, printmaking, and to sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
Because you mentioned Augusta Savage and May Howard Jackson, both of whom are in the Women in Motion show. Mm-hmm. And one woman who is not in the show that I would love is Edmonia Lewis, but we do have Harriet Hosmer in the show, and just making that connection between women sculptors and women designers in the hand, I think is fascinating. And it's not something that people tend to put sculpture in one area and design in another, right? But I like that you're bringing those all together. It's causing me to think about things in different ways.
I appreciate that, Anna. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that seems like a wonderful kind of thinking about that lineage and the expansive directions that you took us in. I will give you the last word, Huewayne, but first I just wanted to thank everyone so much for being here. Thank you to Dr. Anna Marley and Dejay Duckett for being here with us. And I hope to see you all again at a future Art at Noon. So I will give it to Huewayne to say final remarks.
My final remark is like, yo, thank y'all. Like I said, we are here, right? It's great to like think with people about something that like we're curious about, interested in, maybe just attending to. But like again, appreciate y'all for being here, and I'm glad we could do something. Thank y'all, Anna, Abby, Dejay, but I really appreciate y'all, Abby and Anna, for putting this together.
Thank you so much, Huewayne. Great to be together with everyone and see you here in this virtual space and physically at PAFA.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.